and you knew that something was wrong. You knew that there was something off about the illusion, but you couldn't just put your finger on it. You couldn't identify the illusion immediately. Watch this video and see if you can identify the illusion. Illusion revealed. How many of you thought to yourself, his arm right there is not moving very much? It seems like there might be something fishy about that. Did anybody see anything? Were you able to pick it out? What the illusion was? Some of you, I don't know. Some of you are going like this. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you really were able to pick it out. An illusion is something that deceives by producing a false or misleading impression of reality. If someone lives in illusion for long enough, then what do we call them? We call them delusional, because they've lost a handle, a grasp upon what is real. So this morning, the pursuit of what is real has drawn us to this place. I think all of us would agree with the writer of the book of Hebrews when they say this: the fundamental fact of existence is that this trust in God, this faith, is the firm foundation under everything that makes life worth living. The firm foundation on which we build our lives. The fundamental fact on which we base our understanding about reality, about what is real, is our faith. It is our faith that informs and allows us to walk through life with our eyes wide open. Not in a place of illusion, but being fully awake. The path of discipleship is one that leads us deeper into what is real. Do you believe that? Do you agree with that? That we are invited through faith into this fundamental fact, this firm foundation. Well, this morning, we continue on in a teaching series entitled Transforming Community. We aspire as a church, or we aspire to be a church where the truth of Jesus is experienced, that we encounter the living presence and we are constantly learning and stepping deeper into the truth about who Jesus is. And then over the course of time, we're hoping and expecting that our lives will actually be reshaped, that we would be reformed, and that we would be given eyes to see and live in the kingdom of God right now. The kingdom that Jesus said is alive and active and present here in this moment, but we have to have eyes to see. Last week I introduced you to this quote, but I feel like it's going to become a theme that will point to again and again the wonderful Thomas Merton. He said, spirituality allows us to see things for what they really are, to see the real connections of how things hang together, to know the real scoop. All of us want to know the real scoop. We don't want to walk through life in a place of illusion, to where we think we understand what's happening, but ultimately there's something inside of us that recognizes, no, I'm not seeing it clearly. I'm not seeing really what this life is all about and what the truth of God and faith has to say to me in my life. I'm missing the scoop. Clearly, the world offers a different scoop, a different version of reality. If we listen to the world around us, the central message that is told to us about what is real is that you are what you can do. You are what you can accomplish. And if we follow that line of thought, then we could also say you are your job title. You are your bank account. You are your address and where you live. This is a culmination, this is reality about who you are. But this is a false reality. This is an untrue reality. It's an illusion that is presented to us in so many different ways over the last probably several years. I don't know if you've noticed this, but when they're introducing, like on different news stations and sometimes on different shows, you introduce someone and they have their name will pop up, and then occasionally next to their name is their net worth. Have you noticed that? There's a net worth that's like okay, this is so and so, and this is their net worth. And honestly, guys, I think I'm supposed to be impressed, but honestly, every time that I think, when I see that next to it, I go, oh, that's so sad. That's it? I mean, really? Is that all that they're worth? It's just this pile of money, this figure that's next to, I mean, isn't life so much more than, wow, goodness, how sad if that's their net worth? Because I think when Jesus informs us as to our net worth, we are worth infinitely more than whatever figure that we might have next to our name. This series seeks to help us to know what the scoop is. To live with eyes wide open, especially illuminated through the eyes of Jesus. To welcome into our own way of living and thinking, our minds and our hearts, the wisdom that Jesus offers to us about who we really are and what this life is really all about. It draws heavily on one of the great teachers. Many of you are probably familiar with Henry Nouwen. He has been a mentor for so many different people in what spiritual formation is really all about. He is kind and he is humble and he is wise. And we're actually drawing a good bit from his book, which has that title, Spiritual Formation. This is one of the quotes from the beginning of the book. Spiritual formation is a call to discipleship, a call to follow Jesus radically, and so become his true brothers, sisters, sons, and daughters. I know that Nouwen was kind of meditating on a passage from Matthew chapter 12 when Jesus is teaching, and there's a person that kind of pushes their way through the crowd and says, hey, Jesus, your family's outside. And they want to talk to you, and then do you remember what Jesus asks? He asks a question, who's my mother? Who's my brother? Who's my sister? We talked about this a few weeks ago at World Communion, and Jesus answers his own question a little bit later. He says, the person, whoever follows the will of my Father is my mother, is my brother, my sister, and yes, even my mother. See, he redefines through faith, he redefines who is family even to us that would be followers of his. That our family would be much more consistent with those who are radically willing and able to follow him than even it would be for our blood relations. Now, I also imagine Jesus, after giving that nice sermon, he came out and gave his mom a big hug and says, I love you too, Mom. But he radically redefines what it is to be family by those who would follow him radically in discipleship. In the last year, I've discovered some new members of my family. And they are sitting around over here. And there are some, some of you have heard the connection that Pastor Sloan and I have kind of cultivated. We initially had a conversation about a year and a half ago after our church here had prayed and had read, and it had been so much conversation over the course of a few years about the unique kind of dynamics of how racism happens and how it continues and what props it up. And we had exhausted so many different books and looked at racism from so many different angles, and we came to a place where we realized, no, we can't just talk about it and think about it anymore. We've got to actually form a partnership and reach out to an African American church. And so through a connection, I actually just set up an appointment with Pastor Sloan. And on some random day, I don't even think he knew what I was going to talk to him about. He made some time for me. And I said, would you just consider, do you feel like the Spirit is leading you to be a part of a friendship? To be a part of a partnership that have as its goal to be a bridge for reconciliation? To recognize racism is real and to try to figure out a way of being a bridge through relationship and through friendship and understanding and truth-telling. And it's been hard. There have been tears shed at different points as we shared our stories. But boy, I tell you what, Pastor Sloan feels like a brother that I never knew. Both of us committed to walking the road of Jesus. One of the first things that I said to him when I walked in, I said, I believe that this is God's work right here. Some churches would say it's kind of peripheral. It's not the main stuff. No, I feel like it's right in the middle of the gospel. And I'm so honored to be a part of that friendship, to be a disciple, to walk the road of discipleship together. Disciple and discipline, they're one. They're connected. They're a part of the same root. And you can't have one without the other. So discipleship is mostly about devotion, the way that we're devoted to following Jesus. But discipline is how it happens. So you have to have discipleship with discipline, because discipline is where you put the boundaries in place. It's where you make the hard decisions about what does it really mean to be a disciple. Well, discipline makes it happen. But if you lean just on discipline and you forsake discipleship, then you become rigid and angry and judgmental because everybody else isn't following the rules. So you have to have the devotion and you have to have the heart of Jesus that counterbalances the discipline. And so this is one of those insights about the way that we follow together. We have to kind of hold each other accountable to discipline and to discipleship, devotion and the follow through. So that's what our goal is this morning. Now, and suggest that we, in order to move forward as disciples, we have to intentionally let go of something. We have to let go of the illusion, the false reality that is told to us so often by this world. And we have to take up the discipline of prayer. The discipline of prayer. Prayer, essentially, is to call the bluff of the kingdom of this world. To say there's a lot of beautiful things, and don't hear me say there's a bunch of beautiful gifts that are a part of this world, but it's not the real deal. It's not the greater reality. It's to call the bluff. It's to say, no, I'm not going to base my life and my identity in just the things of this world. I'm going to base my life and my identity in something so much bigger and so much more beautiful and so much more satisfying and reconciling. It's the mission of Jesus. It's the kingdom of God. And so I'm at my heart, I'm a guy that's a practitioner. I'm not a statesman at all. My heart wants for us to dig deeply into the way of Jesus and walk it together. That's ultimately what it is. And so I want to give you three different things, three different little encouragements before we come to the communion table here in just a moment. The first thing is if you're trying to develop the discipline of prayer in your life, I think all of us would raise our hand if I said, hey, who feels like that they need to move deeper in prayer? I think probably all of us would raise our hand. And so the first thing that I want you to think about is I want you to think about that to embrace prayer, the discipline of prayer is to embrace wasted time. So embracing prayer is wasting time. And we have to kind of just be okay with that, right? You're probably thinking, what in the heck is he talking about? Prayer. Is Chad saying that prayer is wasting time? I'm actually saying that, yes, I am. I'm saying that prayer is wasting time. The world says that if you're not making the most out of your time, then you're useless. If you're not filling up your schedule, if you're not making sure that your daytimer or your phone is not full at every 15-minute or 30-minute increment, then you're being useless. But prayer tells you a different story. It leads you into a different reality in which you actually set aside time to just waste time with Jesus. Nouwen says prayer is to do nothing useful or productive in the presence of God. It's to simply just be in the presence of God without like I'm doing this so that, like remove that from the equation. Be useless in the presence of God. That is one thing that prayer teaches us. It invites us into a different reality where we don't do that so we can. We do that because we're followers of Jesus and we're wanting to be invited, to be led into this deeper. So embrace the idea of useless time. I have to tell a story on myself. When I was doing the sermon prep earlier on this week, I had a crazy week. I had one of those weeks where there was multiple things on every day. And so I had set aside this particular amount of time, and I was going to use that time to do my sermon writing. And I'd already done a lot of reading and this kind of stuff. And so I got to that time in my day, and I thought to myself, typically I go into the sanctuary and I spend a good bit of time just praying and reflecting before I start writing. But on that day, I thought to myself, I don't have time for that. I need to just get in there and write my sermon. I'm going to go write my sermon about prayer, but I'm not going to have time for prayer. Yeah, so little confession time. I mean, sometimes it's just ridiculous, the things that you say to yourself. I'm too busy to pray. I'm just all this crazy stuff. I don't have time to actually sit and be quiet and center my heart and my soul. Mother Teresa said, I'm not called to be successful. I'm called to be faithful. Can I say that one more time? You are not called to be successful. You are called to be faithful. And if you don't find that time, you don't waste some time praying, I think we're going to miss it. The second thing that I want to say to you is that for this discipline of prayer is find your lonely place. Find your lonely place. Let me read a passage to you. I feel like it's a beautiful passage. This is from Mark chapter 1, verse 32. That evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and the demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him because he went off to that solitary place. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everybody's looking for you, Jesus." Jesus replied, let us go somewhere else to a nearby village so I can preach there also. That is why I've come. So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in the synagogues and driving out demons. And do you see even just the visual of how Jesus' life was? Can you even imagine how crazy and how chaotic Jesus' life was? The crowds followed him everywhere. There are so many needs out there, and I know that some of you are in serving professions where you know and you feel this on a regular basis. There's always somebody needing, somebody that's sick, somebody that's mentally ill, somebody that needs encouragement, somebody that needs from you, and you want to respond to them. But what Jesus realized and I want you to notice, it's on the front and the back, and just kind of in the middle, so easily missed, is Jesus' secret recipe for life. Is that in the middle of the chaos, Jesus found his lonely place. Jesus would not starve his spirit. Jesus would not continue to try to serve and to give on an empty tank. He made sure that he found his lonely place. The great Oswald Chambers says, solitude with God repairs the damage done by the fret and the noise and the clamor of the world. Friends, do not starve yourself of solitude. Make sure that you figure out a way. Ask your spouse, ask your family, can I have some time so that I can nourish my spirit? Find your lonely place. The last thing that I would say is to descend from mind to heart. Descend from mind to heart. This is a quote from Nouwen's book. In order to move from mind to heart, we have to embrace solitude. Speak your heart's cry and listen for the one who calls us beloved. How do you descend? How do you descend? I know that's kind of it's not a tangible way of thinking. How do you descend from head to heart? From cluttered, racing mind to centered, receptive heart. I want to share with you a practice. For those of you who might have a hard time moving from the process center, the information, the crazy that's always kind of spinning, wakes you up at night. I know it does, because you're thinking and you're trying to figure it all out. And instead of moving from this space into this space, I want to teach you a practice that's become so beautiful for me. It's called the breath prayer. And I want you to practice this with me. I want to encourage you to use it throughout the week when you're trying to move from your head to your heart. Most of the time, it's with simple things. It's not with complicated things. And so what I was introduced to was a simple prayer. And it follows the rhythm of breathing. It follows the rhythm of inhale and exhale. And specifically, this is my prayer that I've been praying for the last week or so. And so I will inhale, I belong to you. I belong to you. Or if you even want to make it more simple, I am yours. Would you do it with me? I did this for 30 minutes straight earlier on this week. And my spirit before I started praying this prayer was an absolute chaos. And at the end, after I finished praying this prayer, I did not have an ounce of anxiety in me. And it was simple. It's almost like I read that even these simple mantras, they retrain our brain. Our brains are oftentimes conditioned to operate in ruts, the things that we normally do. And so even a simple mantra like that, it retrains our brain. I found myself saying that same prayer. It wasn't voluntary. It was involuntarily later on in the day. I found myself saying that in my own head. and centering myself again. And I offer that to you, friends. We hear it all the time. I don't have time to pray. In this day and time, I don't think that we have time not to pray. Prayer centers us. It reminds us. It reminds us of what's real. Reminds us of who we are. And it reminds us of what God calls us to. Amen. We're going to come to the